Good morning. For some years now, Montgomery County has used electronic control devices, ECDs, or commonly called tasers, as a least lethal weapon for use in those situations when persuasion and or de-escalation methods are not effective in protecting lives and the public safety. Early this year, questions were raised by some as to whether the use of ECDs by Montgomery County Police were in fact appropriate. These questions, of course, were not raised in a vacuum. A host of incidents throughout our nation have focused intense scrutiny on the use of the force by law enforcement. We ask our police to do a very tough job. We never thank them enough for all that they do to protect the lives and the property of over 1 million residents of Montgomery County, Maryland. I believe we have one of the best police departments, if not the best force in America. No matter how good the training, no matter how good the intentions, the fact is that our police have an awesome responsibility to make judgment calls and make them in the very, very difficult situations. And oftentimes, force is in fact required. We give our police the tools they need to do the job and expect them to do the best job possible with the least amount of force. When questions were raised in March about the use of ECDs by Montgomery County Police, I asked for an independent review. I wanted that review to be comprehensive, and I wanted it to be thorough. Today, you have the report, or we will release the report. I really appreciate the time and effort that Dr. Godfrey Alpert spent over the past 4 months of the review. Now, Dr. Alpert is a professor. He has been conducting research on high-risk police activities for more than 25 years and has published more than 100 journals and has about 15 books as well. Dr. Alpert recently completed a major study on police officers' decision-making funded by the National Institutes of Justice and an investigation of racial profiling for the Miami-Dade County, Florida Police Department. Before I turn the report and release of the report over to Dr. Godfrey, I'm going to ask the Chief Manger to say a few words. Chief?
Thank you, Mr. Leggett. Before I turn it over to Dr. Alpert, I just wanted to say a few things. First, I appreciate Dr. Alpert's review. I certainly was aware of of the work that he had done over the years, but I had just met him when he was hired to do this review for us. Montgomery County Police Department began using tasers 15 years ago. Today, we have about 560 police officers that are equipped with tasers. Over a year ago, we, as we routinely do periodically, established a use of force policy review team to look at our policy, our training, our supervision, and our practice with regard to all of our uses of force. And then the latest development, of course, was in January of this year when the Fourth Circuit came down with the Armstrong decision, which really did change the rules for taser use for those agencies in the Fourth Circuit. So I will certainly allow Dr. Alpert to talk about his findings in the report, but I will just tell you that I thought it was a very comprehensive review, and I was gratified by the fact that that one of his conclusions was that the taser use by the Montgomery County Police Department is low, and that it is not the go-to weapon for our police officers. He cites the fact that we consistently use verbal skills and hands-on techniques prior to any use of the taser, and he concludes that our training does exceed the suggested training by the manufacturer of the weapon. The report does conclude that there are several areas of improvement, and he can talk about them, I will talk about them, but he does, and I quote, he does conclude that Montgomery County Police Department's performance is impressive. The report looks at over 200,000 calls for service that we had last year. Last year, for instance, we had 50,000 crimes that were reported, and we made last year Montgomery County Police Department made over 17,000 arrests. We used force in those 17,000 arrests. We used force 451 times last year. The vast majority, 82% of those uses of force, were just an officer using their hands, either controlling someone, guiding someone, using their hands. Out of those 451 uses of force last year, 59 of them were taser deployments. Some of the areas of improvement that Dr. Alpert talked about was, much of it was with regard to the Armstrong case and the fact that we needed to look at, again, at our policy, training, and supervision to ensure that we were in compliance with the dictates from the Armstrong decision in the Fourth Circuit. That actually was in progress. We started that the day after we received the notification of the Armstrong case this past January. He does suggest that our taser policy be a standalone policy, not be incorporated in our use of force policy, which it is right now. He talks about the fact that we should refer to the device as a weapon and not as a device. And he recommends making sure that we incorporate decision-making skills through our scenario-based training that we do with use of force and with the taser, and that, in fact, has been done as well. Dr. Alpert concluded that officers, and I quote here, that officers in Montgomery County are well-trained and make good decisions. He also affirms our decision to revisit the policy and the training, the supervision, in light of the Armstrong case earlier this year. And just before I turn it over to Dr. Alpert, the Montgomery County Police Department issues a use of force report every year to the public. And he reviewed those use of force reports, and he did conclude that the use of force, our annual use of force report that we release to the public each year should, and I quote here, should serve as a model for other agencies. The report is well organized, laid out in an easily understandable format, and provides a great deal of information. So this spoke to the transparency that this department is trying to give to the public in terms of our use of force. As Mr. Leggett said, there are many situations where use of force is necessary in the job that police officers do. It is my responsibility, and it's the responsibility of this department to make sure our officers, that we have strong policies, that our training is sound, and that officers are abiding by that training. And that certainly is something, a responsibility that we take very seriously. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Jeff Alpert.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning. Let me spend a few minutes explaining what I did, and then I'll go through some of the items that I found. To start with, I was asked to look at the use of the electronic weapons. We call them tasers. That's a brand name, but it's the one that has most of the market, so we'll refer to it, to the weapon as a taser. I was given all the documents and access to all the reports, all the use of force deployment records, all the use of force taser information from the officers who used it in 2014 and 2015. I attended the training. I observed and went through the training that the officers were given on several occasions and spoke with a group of the trainers about what they do and why they do it. I've got to say the Armstrong case is a game changer. It kind of took everyone by surprise when the Fourth Circuit handed it down and kind of told everyone, every police department within the Fourth Circuit, that you need to change your policies, you need to change the way you have used this weapon. I went to the union and asked the union for permission to talk to some of the officers who deployed tasers in those 2 years. We sat for a week with officers who came in. We had focus groups and group interviews, and I was able to find out from these officers their opinions of using the weapon, their opinions of the training they got, their opinions of the organization and how it supported them in their use. It was a very important part of what I looked at. I was able to participate in the use of force review committee and in the policy committee that the department has, and listen to their discussion and actually participate and offer opinions as they discussed the policy, as they discussed the deployments. But the main thing I want to kind of go through is, after doing that for several months, what I found from the records that I reviewed and what I found from interviewing the officers is really summed up, and if you have the report, it's on page 5, and I found this remarkable. I said, perhaps the most important finding of this study is one known well to the officers and the administrators of Montgomery County Police Department. The taser use is low and not the go-to weapon or weapon of choice that is found in so many police departments throughout the United States. Now, let me give you some context to that. In 2010, I believe it was, we completed a very thorough investigation of tasers all throughout the country. And I can remember going to some training bureaus where the training officers were saying, we found the lazy cop syndrome here. We found officers that go to the weapon too early. We found officers who go to the weapon too often. And we really should take it away from them because they're not using it properly. I didn't see that here. I think it's remarkable that you have a department of this size with this many weapons on the street and you have so few deployments. I think it's impressive to look at the training that they've been given. It needs some tweaking. We talked to the trainers about doing more role play, about more decision making. They do a very good job of de-escalating situations. Officers get that. They learn it. They practice it. And over time, they're going to deploy that on the streets. So it's a good setup here. I think the other thing that I wanted to just point out again on page 5 when I'm going through the executive summary is that residents of Montgomery County should be proud of their officers, the training they receive and the thoughtfulness that goes into their decisions to use the taser. This is I don't want to say unique because there are 18,000 police departments in the United States, but this is an impressive department in its taser use. I've seen a lot, I've reviewed a lot, and particularly in our study when we did it for the National Institute of Justice, of departments that didn't do nearly as well. So I think it's a very good report. There were a lot of areas that I suggested that they tweak or change or modify a little bit, but overall, I think they should be congratulated.